tell my younger self as far as writing stuff, because a lot of this stuff is organic. You learn it as you go.
It's strange. It's nothing I ever expected.
I want to tell my stories by eliciting emotion in my audience.
So it's an organic process. They sort of layer on top of each other. Each one makes the next layer more obvious to me.
This whole thing could not have gone any smoother.
I usually say squat only in groups of 3. I like to batch them, like squat, squat, squat.
Look, guys, this one's not going to be like normal. It's just not.
Welcome to the Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the mellifluous Kaden Williams.
That's a big difference. It's like, are you talking or are you doing? What's happening here?
We still have all the pets that think, oh, it's time to eat. It doesn't matter if it's 4 a.m.
My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. Fun fact, the intern's in the house today, if you guys didn't know.
It's true.
Chuck is back.
That's why I came.
Welcome back, Chuck.
Do you need any coffee, sir?
If you would, no creamer, no sugar, just straight black coffee. I appreciate it. Don't spit in it this time.
You mean like a vente?
Oh, I wasn't spitting last time.
Yeah, so I'd like a liter of coffee, please. What's up, everybody in the live chat? Guy, Anthony DeMarco, Trucker, Rick, hello, welcome. Trucker D gets the Keystroke Medium golf clap of appreciation. So
it's only been about a year since I did one of these.
Yeah, do you even remember how to do this, Chuck? Like,
dude, I didn't even recognize you. What are you
talking about?
Wide. Oh, good times, good times. Sorry we missed last week. I was feeling under the weather. I'm still slightly under the weather now. You might be able to hear it in my voice. This is not a luscious broadcasting sound.
I think it might be some post Super Bowl under the weather.
Is it? Oh, it's definitely post Super Bowl. Like I'm slightly hungover and still sick. So, but whatever, the show must go on, except for last week when it canceled it. Yeah, except for when it doesn't, right? Like,
except for when it's a different show.
Yes. Hey, Lisa. Yes, look at what I am wearing. The Get Up.
What
Mahomes it's a Mahomes jersey. Mahomes is a beast.
Football stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Sports ball. I got it.
Sports ball.
Sports ball.
I honestly didn't even know the Super Bowl was yesterday.
Yeah, dude, when I said that, you were like, it was yesterday? And I'm like,
You forgot what a Philistine you were talking to.
Yeah. Might have to rethink your pay schedule here. Welcome, everybody, to the show. It's going to be kind of a chill, relaxed episode today. Scott and I last week were talking about dialogue.
We considered it. We strongly considered talking about it.
And then we didn't. So today we're going to. It should be a fun show. Dialogue is one of those things that it's like my favorite part of writing. Oh, there he went. Somebody kicked him over.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit mobile today.
Damn retirees.
Yeah. He's did I spell it wrong? I even Googled it.
What did you misspell?
Mediocre. Oh, I did spell it wrong. Can I change it? How do I change it? Oh, there we go.
Okay, there you go. All right, I was going to say I changed my name by the little
mediocre.
Yeah, mediocre. Yeah, there's. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. Thank you. You know what's funny about that is when we had Chris Rucchio on the show a couple of weeks ago, I spelled his name. I flip-flopped like a C or an R or something like that. But I was literally looking at the Facebook profile while I was typing it, and I still typed it wrong. And he was like, "Oh, everybody messes it up." And I'm like, "No, dude, I was reading it while typing it, and I still typed it wrong." So whatever. Yeah, so dialogue's my favorite part of writing. I absolutely love it. I try to my stories are
He said excitedly.
except for that part. And I like being creative with the tags and action beats in between because except that I'm very, I can't remember who said it, but somebody told me that I'm very unoriginal when it comes, like I just use said and asked for the most part. Like I don't go uttered or gasped or anything like that.
Every once in a while I'll throw in like if I'm trying to write a scene where like they're trying to be sneaky or something, I might use like whispered.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Or said in hushed tones.
Yeah,
I think
like that.
I think in general, set or ass is fine. Is the way to go. But sometimes you need it for. Sometimes it just actually does fit. It actually is the right word to say whispered.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's just you're looking for a little variety.
Yeah.
Especially in
in general, though, I think said is just one of those words that people just sort of gloss over.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They do in reading, and the problem comes in audio.
Well, in audio, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Listen to any
depending on how your narrator handles the dialogue tags.
The guy that writes the Spencer novels, he uses said constantly, and when reading it is fine, like you said, but when you listen to a Spencer book in audio, it's said.
I can't remember which narrator I had. It might have been Luke Daniels, is one of the early Richard Fox books I did. He because I used said. That's all I used, said and asked, and unless Richard changed on his part, but he just didn't emphasize the said, and it didn't really stand out as much. But sometimes they hit it a little too hard, and it starts to feel like a hammer in the face.
Right.
And then go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
I'll say we'll come back around to this. So my problem with dialogue, I love dialogue. The tricky part is a group of dialogue with a group of people.
Yes.
Because you really need the dialogue tags, attributes, whatever you call them, with lots of people, so you know who the hell is talking, or you need action beats or something.
Right, to differentiate.
I started using a little bit of internal dialogue.
We talked about that in one of your scenes a few months ago. Maybe we can discuss kind of how we got around that.
You know, it's funny you say that. I'm reading Joe Abercrombie, The Blade Itself, the first Law trilogy right now.
Great book.
And then there's Glockter, and he's always got like that part he says out loud, but he has that constant internal snarky ass dialogue that only he hears.
Are you reading it or are you listening to it?
I read the first one, and I'm listening to before they're hanged, or after they're not before they're hanged, or whatever it's called.
The narrator like really nailed Glockta's voice in that, because he kind of talks with a little bit of a lisp because he's missing his teeth, and like you just hear him talk, and it's like a weird like juxtaposition of like this dude's like the evil, like the most like horrible,
he's a horrible person, but you can't help but like him.
Yeah, he's such like he talks and he's like, this guy doesn't sound like he should sound. Like he should be like mustache twirling, like Vader type.
But you know he's talking because of what he says is very identifying.
Right. Yeah,
you just know it's him. You don't have to put he said because you know it's Glockta when he's talking.
Right,
for sure.
And that's a great place to be if you're writing dialogue.
Yeah, that.
Let's dive into that just a little bit. Let's do updates real quick before we kind of dive into all this stuff. Chuck, you're on the hot seat, man. You haven't been here in a while. Let's get a little update from you, man.
It has been more than one hot minute since I did this. I'll just try to give a broad summary. Writing has not been going super well. One of my kids had some issues that required hospitalization and some stuff like that. Everything's fine. Nobody died or anything, but ran up a bunch of bills. I'm back at work, working at a Amazon warehouse, doing a QA work for those guys. I do still write, but I mean, I'm on my days I work, I'm lucky if I get 100 words. And then on the days I'm off, There's still doctor's appointments and things that if my wife's out of town and she travels a lot for her job, I got to get them there. So I'm lucky on my days off if I get 1,000, or I actually got almost 1,000 this morning before I did this. And I'm going to try and get some more tonight. Just trying to close in on the end of that third Jack Dark book for Athon, and Steve and those guys are super patient, which I so appreciate them being so patient. But I'm gonna just be honest about it. The last 6 months or so have seriously impacted not just my writing life, but just my confidence in general in the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just, and that could just be a side effect of everything I went through with the family and all, but it's kind of hard to get in there and, and immerse yourself in it enough to really, really pump out words when I'm constantly questioning myself. It's like, I've been doing this for a long time. Am I done? Is it over?
Right.
And, I've never really made a lot of money or anything out of it. And that's kind of a issue for me these days. Cause like I said, we ran up some bills and stuff, and I got a boy about to start college and all that. And we've got savings that'll help with that. But, down the road, it's, college will burn through a savings account and nothing flat.
Yeah, no shit.
But, I'm not trying to whine or anything.
No, you're good, man.
I think every writer probably runs into this once in a while, just that whole.
I went through it while
wasting my time,
I went through it while I was like doing like good things. Like it sucks, and I think though, to your point, I think you are a very good writer. Like I've read the first Jack Dark book, and I thought it was really, really good. And I said before, like you really can hear your voice in that story, which I think is unique. And not only to you, but also to the character and that book. So it is normal to kind of have those doubts, I think, but have no doubts that your skill as a writer is up there with the best of them. So,
well, thank you, man. I will also like to say that I have actually missed you guys, because you guys are the only people I talk to about writing. I mean, my wife's great and all; she'll listen, but she doesn't get it. She wants me to finish because she likes reading. Like she loved the first 2 Jack Dark books, and she loved Brace Cordova and all that, and she wants more. But like when I start talking about stuff like that, she's just one of those people that's, well, just sit down and do it.
Yeah, right.
Just sit down and do it. And I'm like, you don't get it. You don't.
Writing's a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the long and the short of it. Just been, dealing with that and back at work and trying to get the words in where I can.
Luke says he wants to be a writer like Chuck when he grows up. I think that's everybody's aspiration. So
thank you. That was nice. I appreciate it.
And Leo's here on Facebook. What's up, Leo?
What's up, Leo?
Scott, you want to go next, brother?
Sure. So I finished Blue Sun Armada 4 yesterday and sent it off to the amazing editor Kayleen Williams to do the editing on that. She did some of the other ones, and I'm after a lot of deliberation, I'm gonna end that series there. I had planned 8 or 9 books, but I decided it's just it's always been kind of like my second or third project, and so it's kind of gotten kicked around on the launch schedules, and it has good reviews, but it doesn't really get the traction, and it's never going to get enough of an ROI to have audiobooks. And so I decided and plus I need to really focus on what makes money, or else I'm going to be back at work again, because I'm really nervous about making the leap right now. And so I tied that up. I worked on it. I liked the ending of it, but I left it so I could do it again, but it would feel more like 2 series instead of 1. Like the first 4 books is 1 story arc, and then I could do another one if I wanted to later in time. So I wrapped that up. I'm working on another project for Jeff Chaney and Variant. It's going to be brand new. Last month I completed the 4th book in the Galactic Shield series, which I think it did well. It doesn't. It hasn't sold as much as Jeff Cheney's other collaborations have.
Yeah.
So it's a weird place to be. I can't complain about it because it still does really well by normal standards, but it's just not quite the right for his target audience, I guess, or for his rather massive fan base. So we're going to try something different. I think some of that is because it was billed as a police procedural, and I just think people are not interested in that right now.
Yeah.
I think they don't want that stress, and I don't blame people for that because it is stressful. The funny thing is, it's really more like everything else I write. It's much more space adventure, but there is some. I mean, there's some fairly, in some ways, realistic stuff, like how they're trying to get a warrant and what it takes to get probable cause and some of those things in a sci-fi setting, which is a little bit different. So did that. I'm working on a project for Aethon. I've tried, I've made the leap obviously to full-time writing full-time, and I've tried to like keep some. I've never spent any time maintaining friendships. It's always been work and writing and family, and mostly work. And so I've been taking some time to go out and have coffee and breakfast. Josh and I went and saw a friend of ours, Bob, a while back. That was a good time. The Gulliver, and so I'm doing more of that, and that's interesting. And on that line, I got invited to be back in my band with my new bass.
Very
I got
nice.
for Christmas. So and it's funny because all those guys I was in a band with 15 years ago, most of them are retired now, and so we have like more time, and it's totally chill. But like, we're not going to play bars. We're going to play like rodeos and dances and cookouts and stuff, which turns out pay better than bars. And stay out till 3 a.m.
Right.
Nice.
So we're doing that. I thought about giving a tour of the house since I'm on my phone, and then I'll turn it over to Josh.
Yeah, do it, dude.
Of course, Jen will get mad because hopefully my phone is charged up enough to do that. So this is my office. We've all seen it's very exciting. My computer, all of that. So
how long have you been in the new place, man?
We've been in here since September.
Okay.
My son's room.
Shit, has it been that long? Wow.
Room. He's got a guitar he doesn't play. How do I reverse my camera on this thing? It could probably be easier than doing selfies. I need that Be Real app, right? So it's our living room. I don't know if you can or our kitchen actually.
Yeah.
Right there, it's all extremely modern. Our entryway is rather large. We got a big door that freezes on both sides when it gets really cold. It's pretty nice. And then we have this giant wall, which wasn't finished when we moved in. So that was kind of crazy because of all the supply chains. So the door is just a big giant door that just swings like so.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
But the problem is I was worried about it being broken into, but it's all metal. The problem is that when it gets cold, it sweats.
Oh,
and
yeah, that
the
makes
water
sense.
freezes on both sides of the door, which ruins the wood floors. So the basement, I'm not even sure what I'm showing you guys because I have the phone turned around, but this is our basement. And we don't have any carpet anywhere in the house. It's all concrete or wood. And I won't go into the other kids' rooms and stuff. This right here might be my future podcast space when my oldest moves back in. So that's the basic tour. I got in the garage, but we got somebody in there painting right now because it saved me a lot of time, and I figured I better be writing rather than painting. Oh, and then I'll show one last thing. If I can find it.
I like the wall of windows.
Ceiling. I like the ceiling with the
yeah.
It looks like flooring on it. That's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah. So we got the wood floors, and then the wood ceiling.
Nice. I like that.
Which I like that a lot. We have like these crazy modern looking lights, and we have.
I like that a lot.
So the neat thing is, and Josh has seen this, is.
Oh,
whoops!
Slick.
Bring it down just a little bit. Bring your camera down a little. There you go.
That is so slick, man. I like that.
So that's our sliding glass door there.
The whole thing opens all the way,
like a big lanai wall kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a lanai, and so
yeah.
if I can get it open, So if I open it, it goes all the way. It goes all the way. I'm not going to go all the way because I'll do all the blinds. And then we can go out here and look at our neighbors on the back deck. And we, of course, don't have any furniture yet because it's expensive. But,
Yes.
so you can see where if you're a big entertainer like Josh at a big Super Bowl party, you could, and it was nice, you could open it up.
Yep.
And you could have people inside and out and all that. We put the screens on there because otherwise you'd have too many bugs in Kansas to do much with. Mavis, go back inside.
Hi, Mavis.
Mavis.
Go back inside. Get your toy.
Leo says, "Where's the gimp outfit?"
Yeah, that's in the basement. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have it locked up, so you can't see that. Anyway, so that's it. That's my my update.
The new digs, nice.
The new digs, right? Oh, in the pantry. This is where I spend most of my time every morning. Come in and has like an auto light, so I come in and get my coffee,
Yes.
and I go right.
I'm kind of
It's a
jealous of
must-have.
that pantry. Mine's a tiny closet.
Yep.
The pantry is amazing. I didn't think anything. They're like, you want a pantry? I'm like, I guess, I don't know. But now I walk in there and I can just grab my soda and grab my coffee. You just walk in and get whatever you need. And I'm like, I don't know if I could ever not have a pantry. I think in the
Right.
future I'll just
Yeah,
make
it's
my living
wonderful.
room the pantry if I have to. So that's the house.
Nice.
But this is where I spend most of my time, in this really exciting white room that's got no pictures hanging up any place. So
Oh,
and
good
that's me.
times.
What do you got, Josh?
I think about halfway through the rewrite stage, putting it together of book one. I figured out the plot holes, and so now I'm just going through and fixing those. I think I have like 2 or 3 vaguely whole rewrite chapters to do, but the rest of it is just piecing everything together, and that's coming along. I don't know that I'll have it all done this week, but I want to try to have most of it done this week, so next week I can start getting back into book 2. So, and book 2 I think is sitting around 62,000. The total for book 1 is probably going to end up around 125, 130 ish. Athon work's going really well. We got ahead on some of our formatting last week, and so I've got a couple projects to do this week to stay ahead. And we're looking at doing some new things with Athon, where I'm going to maybe do some monthly release videos, like pre-recorded, like quote unquote professional kind of videos for YouTube or social media, just to kind of broaden our footprint there. I am reading 2 books right now. Chuck, I can't remember if I told you or not. Last year I did basically a challenge to do a book a week reading.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
I did successfully complete it.
Good job.
And this year I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm a little behind this year, like I was last year, so I'm gonna have to spend some time somewhere catching up. But I'm reading. I'm doing a reread through of Tom Clancy's books.
Cool. What are you on now?
I'm just on the second one. I'm doing chronological. So I finished Patriot Games. Now I'm on Red Rabbit. Patriot Games. So far way better than Red Rabbit, and Red Rabbit was his 9th book, but chronologically it's 2nd,
right?
And you can definitely tell he kind of got like the Stephen King long-windedness of like not caring what the editor said and just doing whatever he wanted,
because at that point he could.
Yeah, and so like it's I made a big deal. We were talking about the info dumping that Clancy is memed for, and in Patriot Games there really wasn't any of that. But in
because Patriot Games he didn't really. It was more about the terrorism and them coming after Jack and everything. He didn't really get into the technology stuff until the later books.
Right. Well, and in
the other books, I should say. Yeah,
and in Red Rabbit there is a lot of, especially on this Russian character Andropov, and then also this other character Zaitsev. They do a lot of like introspection, and like pages and pages of just thought process for the character. and stuff that really could be condensed.
That
And
sounds about right.
That's what I'm going through, kind of looking at how he wrote the books. Like, is he being memed for real here, or is this like just a general statement? So I'm going through the books in the reading of the chronological order, kind of like picking apart those aspects of the book. Like, is this necessary info dump, or is it just like kind of extraneous, just ramblings? And so far, Red Rabbit has had a lot more than Patriot Games. And from what I've been told, it's the weakest of the series. And I think after this one, after Red Rabbit is Hunt for Red October, and then Rick mentioned Cardinal the Kremlin. I can't remember that I've ever actually read Cardinal the Kremlin.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get to that book. I've read Hunt for Red October several times.
Either.
But there's been a couple that I haven't read. I know Cardinal the Kremlin is probably one of them. There's one I can't remember off the top of my head. I know that I've read Dead of Honor. I know that I've read Without
Clear and
Remorse.
Present Danger.
I know that I've read Clear and Present Danger. So I don't know. We'll see. It's just one of those interesting, like, as a writer projects I'm going through and
Sure.
fulfilling my goal, but also kind of looking at it constructively too. So
yeah, man, I think that's a good thing to do for writers every once in a while. Go back and reread the what you would call the standards, the classics.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our writers group, I think, but I know that I for sure talked about it with Scott, is that like I really try to stay away from the classics like Heinlein and Asimov and all that stuff, because that writing style is not what I'm trying to do.
But see, here's the thing about that, though. I think we've all reached a point where what I listened to in high school is considered classic music now.
For sure.
I mean, honestly, it is. 80s classics. That's a station on like.
What is people
Sirius,
like when you say 30 years ago? I think 1972.
Right. So
for sure, yeah.
So now, when you say classics, I think about books from the late 70s through the 80s.
Right.
And then the stuff that Asimov and Heinlein and those guys did back in the day, those are like, I don't even know what to call those.
Ancient text.
Yeah, those are ancient frameworks for other things. I mean, it's just so. Yeah, when I say classics, I mean go back and read early King.
For sure, yeah,
stuff like that.
My one of my yearly or kind of every couple of years, I dive back into the Dark Tower series, and I read 1 through 4. I stop at Wizard and Glass. I don't go past Wizard and Glass. I just imagine.
I understand that.
I imagine all that shit happened, but it happened better than it happened in the books. And knowing the end of the Dark Tower, I just kind of go from Wizard and Glass straight to the Dark Tower and then start to cycle over
there
again.
There you go. I can see that.
We'll see if I do that this year. But sorry, that was kind of a long rambling update. Let's talk about dialogue. A couple of people mentioned the Sun. Lou mentioned the Sun Eater. The series by Christopher Rucchio. He was on the show. Fantastic series. If you haven't read it and you like space opera, I know that you've been away from the show. So you have missed my ramblings about the Sun Eater. So very briefly, I will say, read the damn books. They are the Sun Eater books, starting with the Empire of Silence, are some of the best space opera I've ever read in my life. I'm going to kick Scott out of the frame here for a minute while he's doing his own thing. There.
You said Empire of Silence is the first book?
Empire of Silence is the first book in that series. So it's a really good series. And
I'm gonna need something when I finish First Law, so that'll be a good one.
Clancy's a wannabe Hayes. I give this man some ice cream or something. Like, he needs a reward. So yeah, we talk about dialogue, and one of the things that Scott said earlier that keyed my thing is having conversation with multiple characters in the same scene, and then doing dialogue so that it flows. One of the problems that he was having in that scene, and he can tell you about it when he gets back. If he does, he's got to go run and pick up his kid, I think. But when you have like 5 or 6 characters in a scene, and you're having a conversation between all of them,
Right.
and that's super easy to do in a movie. It's even easy to it's fairly easy to do like as from an audiobook context of like if a narrator is using voices, but if they don't, then it could be catchy.
Yeah.
But in writing, he's back for a minute. In writing,
back.
it's slightly difficult to do without doing dialogue tag after dialogue tag after dialogue tag after dialogue tag.
well,
And one of the
but
things
you I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that one of the things that when I looked at this scene that Scott was talking about, and I think a lot of people might have this same hang up, is instead of having dialogue tags for every statement that a character makes, you can kind of look at the flow of the conversation and decide if you need one. For instance, the way that the flow of this conversation went with his characters, he had a central character, we'll call him character A. He was saying things and then fielding responses or questions from the other characters and then kind of like answering them and continuing. So it was like character A, character B, character A, character C, character A, character D, character A. It would always come back to character A for the most part in this sequence. Yeah. And so when I read it and I looked at it, one of the things that you can do with that type of scene is, especially with character A, is if they're having if the flow of the conversation naturally comes back to A, you don't have to say A said. You can leave that whole tag off because you don't need that. If you're reading it and you can tell A is responding to something B said, you can take that off. You don't need it. Another thing you can do is, and this is I learned from a book called what was that book called, Scott, that we listened to, the story the Secrets of Story by Matt Bird.
Yeah, that's the one you just recommended to.
Yeah. Always have your characters doing something other than talking. And so you can give them things to do that will lend themselves to the tags. So for instance, and this is a really simple way to do it, have them eat, right? Like not every scene, but if you have them eat or drink, if they're eating, if they're having a meal, one of the tags could be, he stabbed his asparagus and then ate it, and then he could have a line of dialogue. And so you look at like, what are the characters doing? Are they working on a car engine, or are they doing something other than the talking? And then set up kind of where the characters are at, what they're doing, and then use those tools, use those things that they're doing as the tags. So not every line is he said, she said, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and those little action breaks you're talking about are super good if you use them right, for showing how the character's feeling beyond just the words they're speaking.
Right.
Like when you're talking, like I wrote a short story one time where a couple, they were having a fight and the wife was chopping vegetables for dinner. And it started off, she's like nice and smooth, but then by the time she got angry, she's slamming the knife into the cutting board.
For sure. Right.
Stuff like that. And like the asparagus thing, he's, instead of saying he put a piece of asparagus in his mouth, he stabbed the asparagus with his fork until it clicked on the plate and shoved it into his mouth, to show that he's getting frustrated or whatever.
Yeah.
And so those, I love tying a little bit of action to the dialogue, just to kind of show the feeling, because it's so hard to like express feeling in written dialogue.
For sure.
Yeah.
The underlying emotions there.
Those are great tools. And one of the things I've started to do, what I try to do is I try not to have, because I like to have like 50 people, not 50 people. I like scenes as a reader that are complex and have multiple people in the scene, but they're hard to write. And so sometimes, for the sake of clarity, if they're not needed, I will try to restrict a scene to 2 or 3 people.
Right.
Yeah. 100%.
And not have so many other people. And and not introduce people, and not be afraid to have people in the scene who are not named. You don't have to name every door guard you walk past, even if your character knows.
Right.
Door guard. And then I've also started having the protagonist or the speaker make the POV character make some judgments mentally. Like somebody will say something and I'll think I didn't disagree, but then just have him talk, and it kind of puts you.
Yeah.
This is who's talking now.
Yeah, another couple of tricks that you can use when you've got groups like that, I found, is number one. I think this is where knowing your character's individual voices really shines.
For sure.
Because like you can have one character who would say, "You did this thing," whereas the other character might say, "Y'all did that."
Yeah.
And it's the word structure in the way they speak can help differentiate for the reader who's actually doing the talking. And then like if you've got like character A, if he wants to redirect the reader's attention, they can go, "Hey, character B, did you go and blah, blah, blah?" And that sort of puts the focus on that character. And that can kind of help keep the reader, in line with who's speaking and who's responding and stuff like that.
One of the things you don't want to do, and I want to get to Bard's question here in a minute. Matter of fact, I'm going to star it so I remember. But one of the things you don't want to do is something that I have seen in some older books, and even when I was one of the books I read last year was Brad Thor's Lion of Lucerne books.
Oh,
I
that's
don't know
a good one.
if I read it last year or this year,
That's
but
a good one.
it was written 20 years ago, so there's a lot of things that is included in the writing of that book that are probably they're significantly out of date now.
Sure.
Two things are like head hopping between characters, and that's kind of a completely other discussion. But if you're having a discussion, make sure that you are aware of who your point of view character is in the scene, so that you're not adding in internal dialogue or internal reactions from the other characters.
Right.
And that in and of itself can help you with the scene, because if one of the other characters has a negative reaction to something that's being said, you can show that physically as a expression or as a movement and use that as a dialogue tag. And that way you're not head hopping. But also having the conversation not using the names. That's what I was trying to get to originally. So one of the things not to do is what I see a lot of older books do, and even some newer books too, is when they're directing a conversation, you're like using the name in the dialogue of the character. So like I would say, Chuck, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then I turn to Scott and I'm like, yeah, so Scott, blah, 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 blah.
Well, you definitely don't want to do it every single time.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Sparingly.
Don't do that every dialogue whenever you're redirecting the conversation. You don't want to use those names more often than not, because normally when you're having a conversation, you normally don't use anybody's name that you're talking to, right?
And you can also use the like we were talking about the action tags. You can say like A looked at B and said blah blah blah.
For sure, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's something that should be and can be used. But the whole, it's kind of like the Maid and Butler thing, where you're like, well, as you know, Chuck, blah 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 blah. There are times where you can. There are times when you can use that. Like there's a lot of different aspects of actually writing dialogue that you write it and it doesn't sound, or it's not actual people talking, right? It's written dialogue, so it sounds different. There's kind of a flow and kind of a poetry to it in your writing that normally people don't use. And so sometimes it's okay to put in the name, Chuck, blah 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 blah.
Sure.
But every time as a way to like keep track of the conversation, don't do that. But I do want to touch on Luke's comment here, where he's talking about my struggle with dialogue when there's a back and forth is not having any action to break up the dialogue. And there was actually a follow-up comment to that. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I lost where I started. And of course, now I'm trying to find how much and how to avoid stage direction. So stage direction is it's a funny thing because you have to set the stage somehow.
Yeah.
Like somebody was mentioning white space earlier, and I can't remember who that was. But you have to set the stage somehow. So you're going to have to set up where are they at, what are they doing, that kind of thing. But a lot of the pitfalls in not having a straight back and forth is not having a straight back and forth, right? Just don't have a section or a sequence where all they're doing is talking, because there's always things that the characters could or should be doing, even if they're not directly related to the plot. For instance, in Weaponized, the second Weaponized book, in the beginning, their ship was damaged at the end of the first book. And so they're kind of doing some maintenance on the ship. Now, the maintenance isn't exciting. It's not anything that I'm doing a chapter on. I'm not writing a book on how to fix a spaceship, but it gives the character something to do while they're talking about everything else. And so you can throw in he crawled underneath, the panel or whatever, and he's working in the panel, or you can have something where his voice is echoing out from the panel, and just setting up those kind of things so they're doing something other than having a conversation.
Right.
But it also, that helps push, that's showing what you're trying to do in your book. I need them to work on the book, but I'm not just going to have a sequence of them working on the ship. I need to include other stuff in there. So we're stacking, what I like to call stacking scenes, where instead of having one scene where they're doing one thing, you have one scene where they're doing at least three things.
Yep.
Every single one of my I call them scenes and sequences and chapters, but every single one of my sequences, which is kind of several scenes put together, I try to do at least three things, and they're usually separate. Do we set it up with them working on the ship and then transition to maybe we should buy a new ship, and like kind of go through that, or you can layer on multiple items at the same time, and so you're getting away from the like what Luke is saying here, having a back and forth without anything going on. If you have a scene where they're working on a ship, and a scene where they're talking about getting a new ship, and a scene where they're talking about food, take all of that and put it in the same scene, and make it all function together as one scene, and then you have a way to have the characters doing more than just having the conversation that you need to.
Yeah, I always approach that kind of thing with like three things in mind. If you've got a back and forth between two characters, like just whatever. So you've got the dialogue, obviously the two characters speaking to one another, what they say, how they say it, that sort of thing.
Right.
You've got the external action that's going on around them, whether they're just sitting there having a glass of scotch with each other while they're talking, or if they're walking in a park or something more dramatic, you don't know.
Right.
But there's that external action. And then the third thing that I always try to have, the internal reaction.
Yep.
And this is where you, like, one character will say something, and then I would write, Josh took a slow slip of his drink while he studied Scott. And then he would come in and say whatever he says. And that sort of shows the external action and the internal reaction. He's having to take a minute to think about that before he replied. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Kind of. And that's usually the three things I try to have going on in any kind of interaction scene between characters.
I think the one thing that maybe gets kind of overlooked when you're talking about dialogue is dialogue. It's not actual, like, speech, right? Actual speech is very clunky and
messy.
A lot of times it doesn't mean anything. Like, a lot of times people just talk and nobody has said anything. But with the one thing with dialogue in books is you're not writing speech, you're writing dialogue. And so you can make it sound wittier, you can make it sound smart, you can just take your time. It's like when you have an argument with your wife and then like 2 days later in the shower you're like, oh man, if I would have thought of that
just said,
at that point it's been the best awesomest comeback ever. Well, that's the stuff that you can, that's how you write the dialogue,
right?
Like you'll have your first draft, which is the argument with your wife that you lost, and then the second draft is, oh, this is the best comeback ever. That's what you put in the dialogue, and unless that facilitates like a character where the character always is having that instance of light bulb later, and that is it's actually an interesting character trait that you can put into your character, But Guy is right. Dialogue requires efficiency, and
otherwise you lose the reader.
And if your characters are not having meaningful, I mean, they can talk about things like they can talk about like this burger is the best burger ever, but you're not going to have a chapter unless you're like Quentin Tarantino. You're not going to have a chapter on how good the burger is. That is it's flavor, it's spice for a section that you're working on. You can put that in there, and I have a scene like that where we talk about a good burger, but it's like 3 lines of the entire scene.
Yeah.
And
that just adds that just puts a little more flesh on the skeleton.
100%. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, that's why I love dialogue, is because dialogue you can, and like you said it too, is you can kind of use character traits in the dialogue by how they speak, what they say. And it doesn't have to be, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, in Weaponized 1, I've got a character that says my guy. Like he like that's his quirk, right? Everybody has their specific quirk that they have when they speak. It's a tick that a lot of times they don't even know that they have. I know that I have them. I know my wife has them. A lot of people have ticks that they use in their speech subconsciously. And if you can find something like that and it's not annoying, but
sometimes you kind of want it to be annoying. That is,
if that's the point
the
of
Navigator in First Law.
Yes, yeah.
You know, I mean, great character, but anytime I read him, I knew who was talking, just because. Oh no, not my way. No.
Yes, 100%. And if you have, like, one of my characters doesn't curse in the book. He's religious and doesn't curse. The main character also doesn't curse, but not for the same I mean, he does, but it's very rare, because he is, I've kind of written him as, a lot of the thing I've tried to do with this book is not make it a like hard-nosed serious book, but my other books that I've written, like Terra Nova was a very kind of quirky, funny type of interaction that most of the characters had. Valor, there was a lot of humor in a lot of the scenes that I had. And with this book, I'm almost going like Tears of the Sun with it, right? Like if you've ever seen Tears of the Sun, Tears of the Sun is a fantastic military story. It's a tragic story. There's a lot of like brutal things that happen, but that movie works because none of the SEALs really joked together.
Not at all. Those guys were hardcore.
They were hard-nosed. They were very serious.
All business.
And it wasn't out of character. It wasn't like, oh my God, one of these guys are crack a joke, because, you know, in military, you've got all the gallows humor that you throw back and forth. These guys were serious. And I think the kind of the nature of what they were dealing with in the movie, like the circumstances, kind of facilitated that.
Humor doesn't apply,
right? And so that's kind of the kind of a line that I'm taking with the majority of the characters. I do have a character that's kind of irreverent. Really isn't the word, but he's more loose than the other characters when it comes to kind of the humor. But I'm the commander, the Frank Logan. He doesn't curse because he's more like, he considers himself to be the commander, but also kind of like a role model kind of situation. And he wants to present himself as in control and in charge, and capable. And so he doesn't need to curse. He doesn't feel the need to do any of that. Like, he can handle what he needs to handle without going, oh shit. Like, and so that a couple of those things, when you look at the dialogue, when you write specific characters like that, you can make the reader understand who is talking, and a lot of this goes for audio and like actual books, because you can write it in such a way where if you're reading the conversation and it flows, and you can tell without knowing who's talking, but as you go back and you read it, right? Like, because while you're writing it, you kind of feel along, but if you go back and you read it, and you can read the flow of the conversation without the dialogue tags, take the dialogue tags out and just have the dialogue. Or if you can have an action beat or intersperse them, because eventually you can get to a point where you have 2 or 3 seds, maybe 1 or 2 action beats, and like 17 lines of dialogue.
Right.
And those kind of written scenes will really show the work that you did to make that scene significant. One of the things that I recommend, and I talked about it a couple years ago with dialogue, especially in writing smart dialogue, is taking Aaron Sorkin's screenwriting masterclass. But also, if you just like watch all of his movies, his dialogue, he always writes smart characters, right? But his dialogue is always snappy. It's always on point. One of the shows that he was a showrunner on was The West Wing.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of like your political leanings or whatever, like I don't care, Republican, Democrat, left, right, or whatever, you can watch The West Wing just for the dialogue.
Oh yeah. I mean,
as a writer, you will gain so much just from how he writes different characters.
Mm-hmm.
I did a whole, like, I think I went like 3 months and I binged everything Sorkin and learned.
He did A Few Good Men, didn't he?
He did. That was his first movie. He literally.
I actually rewatched that just like a week or 2 ago.
He literally wrote that on napkins.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. The dialogue through that whole thing was just
and that's actually a really good example of how it's dialogue and not speech.
Right. I think you get that a lot in legal type thrillers too, when you're in the courtroom and stuff, and there's a lot of back and forth type stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I think he's probably one of the go-tos for learning how to do tight dialogue for real.
I think too, like, obviously, like learning your characters' idiosyncrasies and like gaining a better knowledge. Like when I finished my first Weaponized book, there was a lot of stuff in the beginning that when I went back and started doing the rewrite, I had to change, because I think everybody has this problem when they start their book and they don't really know the characters like as well as they do when they get done with the book. I always go back and redo dialogue to make it sound like, because now I understand the characters. Now I know who they are.
Yeah.
Now I know like all of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
I can go back and kind of retool that dialogue. And not so you don't really have to do it like if your writing style doesn't change and the narrative is all the same and all that stuff. That's fine. But I like to go back and do a complete second pass on dialogue and just look.
You want to make sure it's true to the characters.
100%. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I think kind of gets a bad rap. Not a bad rap, but not enough attention is unique, good dialogue. Instead of just having hey, do you want to go to the store? Yes. Okay, let's go to the store. Also, because it's dialogue and not speech, you can leave out all of that stuff. You don't have to do the small talk unless it's necessary. But also, a lot of beginning dialogue writers don't give the reader enough credit, and so they like specifically like specify,
kind of spoon feed them.
Yes, like we are going to the store. This is why we're going to the store, or something like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of my writing, and I have this problem. I don't think it's a big problem, but I underfeed significantly. So I make my I got edit notes back on a sample edit that I did for Weaponized 1, and the editor was like, I'm missing a lot of like stuff here. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, well, in the 2 chapters that you did, none of that stuff is going to make sense but I expect the reader to do work and glean it out of context. And that's like, I do that a lot with my narrative, but I do it significantly with my dialogue, because if you're having a conversation and you are making your characters like it's on the nose, and they're saying exactly what they mean, or they're saying exactly what they need, and there's like, we need to fix the engine so that it runs. Instead of saying something like that, you can say, hey, we got to fix it.
Right.
And you can take the engine out, take the proper noun, take all of the identifying stuff out of it, and just put the we need to fix it, because out of context, the reader will understand what you're saying. You don't need to tell the reader exactly what they're saying. Another great thing to do is to have a character not say what they're thinking. And so if they're having a conversation and they think one thing, but they say another for whatever reason, everybody does that, right? So if you're having a conversation and somebody says something stupid, the main character might not react to that, or he might, but you can have like an internal bit where the character is like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. But then he says, maybe we can use that, or maybe there's a different way to do it. And
let's put that on the back burner.
Right. So lots of like, if you stop and think about the scene and what you're doing with the scene and what the dialogue is doing, not just having the characters interact, but what is the dialogue doing for the story specifically, you can kind of break down, is the dialogue explaining something to the character? Is it doing something for the reader? And then you can break down those elements and say, okay, if this is just doing something for the character and the reader already knows the information, do we need it?
Exactly.
Or can we present something else, in the dialogue, so that if the reader already knows, for instance, I've used an engine broke, right? Because that's kind of the scene that I've been talking about here. If the reader already knows the engine is broke, you don't have to have a conversation for the characters to tell the other characters that the character is broke or the engine is broke. The reader already knows that. So you can have a section of if you need to say why the engine is broke, then you can just say, and the reader already knows why, just have a sentence. So he broke it. He told the repair guy what happened to the engine. And then keep going. So you don't like I did it a lot in my first books, where if one character didn't know the information that another character knew, I would like rehash all of that information through dialogue, but the reader already knows it. So it's like repeat. The reader is like, I know this already, but the other character needs to know it. But now I just and then he told the story and move on, because you don't you don't need to
rehash the details of it. Just let the reader know that information was conveyed.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I do that a lot, even with first person. It's like a bunch of shit would happen in previous chapters, and then he meets up with somebody later, and all the character needs to say is, I told him what happened to me this morning.
Right.
Boom. You're done.
Scott, you're back, but there he is. Oh, that was very, very scary.
Whoa. That was kind of a intense little intro there, buddy. You had your whole Terminator thing going on there.
I'll be back.
I'll be back. I watched that the other day. Speaking of dialogue.
Anyway. Yeah, I don't know.
He ended up.
Great timing, Scott. Great timing.
I know, right?
Dialogue. I mean, I could talk about it forever. Dialogue is one of my favorite things. It's for me, like, once you sit down and you just are crafting it instead of using it as a plot delivery thing. Mm-hmm. It's like everything. Like you craft better action scenes, you craft better descriptions, you craft different things. The dialogue is something that you need to work at and craft into something that you're good at. And if you're not good at it, really look at it and go, why is it not working? Like, what am I doing with this that needs to happen through dialogue? Does it need to happen through dialogue? Can we do it somewhere else? And can we use the dialogue for something else? And
Right. And yeah, I mean, you also got to ask yourself, what's the most like concise way to handle it? Is it going to be dialogue? Is it going to be some kind of exposition? I mean, you know,
for sure.
Yeah.
Thompson, I only talk chit chat. Yes. Sure. Terminator 2, by the way, is one of my favorite Jim Cameron movies. Like that and The Abyss and Aliens.
Yeah.
Nobody loves Terminator 3. Terminator 3, man.
Yeah.
They should have stopped. They should have stopped it too. As far as I'm concerned, the story stopped it too.
You know, everybody hates on Terminator Salvation. I didn't mind Terminator Salvation. I thought that's the one with Christian Bale. I
didn't hate it. It was all right.
I kind of like Christian Bale. He's pretty good.
I still think they should have just like
from the second Terminator movie.
Yeah.
Wait, your dad has the motorcycle?
Well,
the actual bike. Oh, well,
there
was more than
had
one.
Like 35 of them.
Yeah.
And so a few years ago, he bought one that had been sitting around it was never used in the movie, but it was like exactly like all the ones they use. It was part of their fleet of motorcycles to wreck. And it's old. I think it's a flathead, whatever.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Speaking of Terminator 3, at the end of Terminator 3, this is kind of a flash into Josh's past here. At the end of Terminator 3, when all the nuke missiles start going off, when that movie came out, I was working in the nuke missile fields in Wyoming. And it got to the end of that scene, and we were in the MAF, the Missile Alert Facility. We're all sitting there. We're all watching the movie. The end of the movie goes, and then they show this farm field. The nuke missiles are out in the middle of nowhere in farmers' fields. Like, they're literally in the field. The farmer plants around the nuke missile thing, right? And so when all the nukes started going off and that showed this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere and then a missile track, we all looked at each other and went,
damn.
And then that night I woke up in like hot sweats, like having nightmares about the missiles going off. And like it was nuts. It was so as far as that movie goes, that part, the very end is actually accurate. They are out in the middle of nowhere in farmers' fields. Yeah. So if you're ever driving in Wyoming or Colorado or Montana or North Dakota and you start seeing these streaks through the air coming out of it, bad times are happening. Just FYI, bad times are happening.
Probably a balloon invasion going on or something.
Balloon invasion.
coming after us with their best tech.
Yeah, no joke.
Oh my gosh, that's good.
Well, let's wrap it up here, guys. We've been going for an hour. We can ramble about it. Everybody that joined us in the live chat, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. Sorry about missing last week. I'll attempt to not be sick again on a Monday. I don't know how well I can pull that off. Thomas V, thank you so much for hanging out. Rick, Tom, Kit, everybody else, Guy, DeMarco, Patricia in the chat. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today, man. It was a good show. And Scott, also, thanks for popping in and hanging out with us occasionally.
Nice to get the band back together.
That's right. That's right. Everybody else, I hope you guys have a great Monday. We'll be back again next week talking about some reading, some writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium.
Peace folks.